Yep, we're talking about this. Jazz festivals. I want to start off this video by asking y'all a question. So when you plan on going to a jazz festival, or you just see that there's a jazz festival, what do you expect to see? What do you expect to hear at a jazz festival? I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds to think about it, because I know I got my answer. All right, so if your answer is jazz, that's an understandable and respectable answer. I would feel the same way. I would love to see jazz at a jazz festival. Okay, now let's flip it a little bit, because maybe that question is too easy. Maybe it's too easy, and maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it makes you uncomfortable, or you're mad at me for asking that question. Okay, let's flip it. What kind of music do you expect to see at Coachella? What kind of music do you expect to hear at Bonnaroo? What kind of music do you expect to hear at South by Southwest? Now, obviously, you could say that these festivals are kind of open-ended, right? But it's definitely focused more on modern music, I would say. And especially some of these festivals primarily feature pop music. They might feature some indie music, some alternative, some electronica, some dance, whatever. It might feature all of that stuff. However, if you have a festival that specifically markets itself as a genre, you probably expect to hear that genre, or at least that discipline, whatever, right? So let's flip the question again. What do you expect to hear when you're going to, let's make up a festival. Let's make up Sri Lanka Funk Festival. What do you expect to hear? Funk. You probably expect to see some funk. Well, okay, what about Timbuktu Rock Festival? Rock and Metal Festival, whatever. I'm sure if you went to a rock festival and saw a Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie live at Massey Hall tribute band, you're like, what? I mean, it's probably cool, right? Hey, they're being a little more open-minded. Okay, well, this is exactly the kind of thing that's going around social media right now. It may not be kind of, the hot topic, but it's I think it's about to start blowing up a little bit for a couple of reasons. But if you've been kind of trolling around Twitter, Instagram, these little places, you may have been seeing that there's some mixed, kind of polarized opinions on the lineups of some major jazz festivals. And the two that we're going to mainly talk about today is going to be Blue Note Jazz Festival and the Montreux Jazz Festival. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because this is not new. This is not a new thing, right? This is like jazz festivals in the past few decades have been questionable at best about some of the lineups in the most major jazz festivals that we know of. Big names, super big names. And while I can understand that it's a good thing to include some new acts, some people that could bring in more people to the festival, I have no problem with that type of programming. I can also understand from the other half of it, or the other side, maybe not half, just the other side of it, that people who have been longtime festival goers are confused when they see Ed Sheeran and Neo and Chance the Rapper on a jazz lineup. Is that crazy? Yeah, I don't know. It seems crazy to me. But just to give you an idea, I'm gonna do this in post. But right now on the screen, you should be seeing the lineup for the Montreux Jazz Festival. So I'm looking at the Montreux Jazz Festival list right now, and look, there are 75 musicians or acts that I see on Montreux Jazz Festival. Do you want to know how many jazz musicians there are? Well, we can look at them right now. We can see Pat Metheny and, oh, great, Chris Fishman and Joe Dice, incredible young musicians. I'm glad they're getting a gig. You got, who else you got on here? Marcus Miller can be considered, a part of that tradition. And, of course, John Batiste, even Jacob Collier can be considered a part of that tradition. Okay, why am I looking for jazz musicians on a jazz festival lineup? It's just crazy. Why am I scrolling through to try to find, bro, we got Mark Ronson. What? Dude, Lil Nas X. Listen, love me some Bob Dylan, man. Sam Smith, great. Why? Sorry, this has become a lot less organized than I thought. But think about it. Why? Okay, you know what? Before we even think about it, let's go to another jazz festival that we just talked about. Let's look at Blue Note's jazz festival lineup. Now, Blue Note is going to be a little better here because they have the artist in residence, Robert Glasper, which, again, I'm not going to speak like I know about all the behind the scenes about these festivals, but I'm assuming that he had some hand in the curation and programming of the set. So there's obviously going to be a lot more people that are at least a part of the tradition and a part of the legacy and lineage and the sound of jazz music. But again, even though there are more jazz musicians here, don't you think it's a little interesting that the musicians that are being chosen don't really have anything to do with jazz itself. Now, the main reason why I have an issue with this, because otherwise I don't care, but the main reason why I have an issue with all this is because, these are great lineups. I mean, you can see some of the quote tweets or references, whatever, people sharing these pictures of the lineup saying, wow, this is a fire lineup. This is great. I love this. I agree. These are great musicians, man. I think that the fact that all these different types of genres and musicians and artists and disciplines are getting to interact with each other, and then audiences that go there are able to see, and cross-pollinate. Everybody benefits everyone. The bigger names will bring in more people to see the smaller names who can then get some more fans. It's great. I love it. Clap it up for that because that's great. However, there's one weird thing going on that I'm noticing right here. Why are we calling it jazz? Especially because there's a crowd of people that scream gatekeeping. Like, you're gatekeeping as soon as you say, well, why can't this be jazz? It's like, well, if you're gonna ask the question, why can't this be jazz? Why does it have to be jazz? Why do you need that word? Is there something about the word that just sounds cool? Does it look cool? The J-A-Z-Z? Does it set off some type of synesthetic effect or something? Like, why the word jazz for this type of a lineup in music? Now, obviously, when we start asking these questions, it starts to lead you down a path of having to ask an even bigger question, which I don't really want to address too much in this video because this video would be too long if I did that. But you didn't have to ask the question, okay, if there's a problem with calling it a jazz festival, then what is jazz, right? You have to start asking that. Again, that might be a topic for another video, but right now, I guess as an intro to that topic, let's look at another question. Is jazz, to you, is jazz a sound or a concept? Because this starts to get into some really interesting territory. Because this is the reason why I want to talk about this video. Because as we look at this lineup, as we look at all these amazing musicians, we can make an argument that, hey, a lot of these musicians here, maybe some of these musicians, you can't really say that. I mean, like, come on, dude, like Ed Sheeran. Again, they're great people, but for real? No, but seriously, if you look at all these musicians and look at these artists, there's a lot of jazz influence coming back into the fray. You could argue that it never really went away, but I would say that there's a lot more flexibility from the artists and the producers and managers, everybody to let that sound in and trust that to make the music more interesting, which is great. I think that's killing that's happening to music. However, is jazz just a bunch of harmony? Is jazz just a bunch of cool things? If you put a major 7 or a flat 7 or a flat 9, something, does it automatically become jazz? Well, then you have to start asking some other questions. Because this is, to me, this feels like the only type of music where you can ask this question: is jazz a sound or a concept? No other genre asks this question, except maybe like hip hop or the blues, because you can actually start referencing some conversations about that. But think about it: has anybody said, is gospel a sound or a concept? Like, what about, is EDM a sound or a concept? Is rock a sound? No one's ever said that. Those music styles, right? For whatever label you want to put on them. Those music styles are defined very clearly by their sound, right? If you hear something, you hear a beat, you hear boom boom cat boom boom cat boom boom cat. You hear something like that, right? You probably, okay, this is like a rock beat. As soon as you do like cat, okay, that's like punk or speed punk, whatever. You have all these different names for it, right? Or if you hear cat boom boom cat boom, you hear something like that. Oh man, that's kind of funky. That's funk, whatever. So what about jazz? What about jazz? Again, as you can see with this type of conversation, we can go down a really long rabbit hole. But again, that's not the point of this video. I just wanted to introduce that topic and my feelings about it to kind of segue into a bigger point that I have. Because if we're talking about jazz as a sound or a concept, if we're leaning more on the concept side of things, which is when you're talking about the evolution of the music, then this gets into another bigger issue that I have. When talking about jazz, it ends up coming to a thing where we're trying to figure out what are the main elements that make jazz jazz, and do they need to be preserved? Do they need to always be present? Well, again, once you start looking at other genres, what are the main defining characteristics of funk music, of rock, like rock and roll, early rock and roll? Or what about punk? What about metal music? What about hip hop, rap, R&B, gospel, any of these types of music, like some blues, whatever? What are the identifying factors of the music that make it what it is? And I think once you look at those, it starts to be easy to draw these lines that don't necessarily have to be hard lined, right? They're just lines that are very loose. They say, oh yeah, that's what makes this music sounds like this. But you can take elements from those different types of music and mix them. You get things like fusion when you do that. Or you just get a completely new thing that maybe the musicians come up with a name for it or the critics come up with a name for it. Well, that leads me to this next point. Why are we holding on to jazz as a word to use for stuff like this? Like, I really think that there's something deeper that maybe I don't know about. Maybe there's something a little more, maybe not sinister, but maybe more marketing. Because it seems like when you put artists like Chance the Rapper and, you know, Talib Kweli, Mary J. Blige, Nas, like, you know, incredible black musicians, right, that are a part of our heritage, rich musical heritage that we should champion, right? When you put them in a jazz festival, it seems like this is going to be a weird analogy because, again, I'm not saying anything bad about their music, but just bear with me about this analogy. When you put somebody like Ed Sheeran in a jazz festival, to me it seems like you're taking a McDonald's hamburger, taking away the wrapper, and putting it on a fancy plate with a candlelit dinner in a fancy restaurant. Like, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Like, again, I'm not saying anything bad about the music. Again, these musicians are great, and they've done a lot to inspire a lot of people, and obviously they're doing something right. But my issue with it is, again, I'm kind of poking the bear a little bit, but when you have artists like Mary J. Blige, Nas, Chance the Rapper headlining a jazz festival, headlining, not just an act somewhere. You know, I read an article somewhere talking about how, like, hey, you know, they may not be the main thing, but they're attracting people in. It's like, they're headlining the festival. That's crazy. So, of course, it feels a little bit like, you know, if they were in another festival, maybe either they might not sell as many tickets, or if they do, the vibe is completely different. Maybe they won't attract that mixture of, like, old and young audience that they're looking for. But something about using jazz like that just feels weird. Like, why are we taking the word jazz and placing so much emphasis on it instead of trying to make something new? That's my main argument. If we're talking about, we need to stop, you know, for example, let's use, you know, one of the great forces in our music today, Nicholas Payton. Again, I'm poking the bear a little bit, but Nicholas Payton has publicly come out saying how much he does not like jazz. He said jazz is dead. Does not like jazz as in like the music, he doesn't play it, but just the word. He doesn't like the word. And he says, bam, Black American music. That's what we should be using according to him. But he's at a jazz festival. He's at multiple jazz festivals. He's also a part of New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But, you know, you got Nicholas Payton who says, you know, jazz is dead on the same festival as someone. Again, you see something that's going on right here, right? Like, there's a pattern that I'm trying to figure out. And the reason why I'm investigating is because I think people won't have to really scream gatekeep if people will try to do the same things that our forefathers in jazz have done. Because Charlie Parker didn't call his music jazz. I can't remember if Dizzy Gillespie ever did either, but they were trying to create something new. And if we're trying to learn lessons from these people who are creating something new, then we should be bold enough to try to create something new as a genre, create something new out of that. I think there's something really beautiful that can happen when you put these pop musicians, hip hop musicians, R&B musicians in the same field as jazz musicians. Something beautiful can happen. But when you're calling this thing a jazz festival because you want to sell some tickets to a more sophisticated audience or whatever else that you're doing, then you kind of lose me a little bit. And I know I might be committing career suicide because maybe I might be playing at one of these festivals someday. And again, they get the bread, I'll probably do it. I'm not going to turn it down. I just think that there's something more that can happen. I think there's something more that we can do to push forward the music in a meaningful way, because it just feels like a cop-out to just settle on this. And maybe it's more than a cop-out. Maybe it's a survival tactic. I can understand. Some of these festivals have been around for 40, 50 years, maybe 60 years, some of these jazz festivals. And not all of them are like that. I should make a disclaimer. Not every jazz festival is like this. But I know that some of these festivals have been around for such a long time. And I understand that, you know, it must be very jarring to have Ben Webster, Joe Zawinul, Cannonball Adderley, Miles, like on a festival, and all of a sudden years later they're gone, and now who is gonna come and replace them? Who's gonna come and take the spots of these monumental giants that were selling tickets just because they were awesome, right? Just because they were geniuses? Who's gonna do that? So I can understand that they're probably kind of scratching their heads and seeing what can they do. And of course, the main thing that jazz festivals have been doing for the past like 30, 40 years or however long has been bringing in more popular acts that can draw in more fans so that they can sell tickets. Because otherwise, yeah, people know the unfortunate reality is that jazz doesn't sell. it just doesn't anymore because, you know, jazz as it is right now is kind of museum music. I'm going to admit that. All of you who are coming to my channel to watch and learn from me and any other channel are coming to learn kind of Renaissance music, how to play the music of the masters in the past who inspire us to be better at our instrument and at life in general, right? It's the same thing that classical musicians are doing, which is fine. I love that. But that's the reason why it feels weird to me that if we're going to call something jazz and we're going to play jazz, that we have to include other things that are not jazz just to elevate the status or the, I don't know, the presentation and marketability of jazz itself. So I don't know. Again, this is, if you expected a video essay, I'm sorry, because that's not what this is. It's kind of just like a little rant video. I wanted to start the conversation. I have a lot of ideas. I got a lot of thoughts. And I kind of want to hear more of what you have to say about this as well, so y'all can put it in the comments. But I guess my final thoughts about this is that, yeah, I really don't think that, I don't know, I really think it's kind of hypocritical to say that jazz musicians are gatekeeping, or like I'm gatekeeping for this, when you don't want to take the initiative to try and envision something new. Jazz is not the first musical fusion. It's not the first genre of music to feature improvisation. It's not the first music to be like this, what it is, and it's not going to be the last. So why don't we try to work together to actually create something new? Where's the next frontier? Where's the next horizon? Why does it have to be jazz? Again, I love playing jazz, but I also love playing other types of music. And I can recognize that they are different types of music. I know that J-pop is J-pop. I know that certain types of video game music is video game music. I know that gospel is gospel. I know that rap is rap, hip-hop, R&B, metal. I love Meshuggah. You know what I'm saying? I know all this stuff is that because I can recognize it as the sound. But can you recognize jazz by the sound? And if jazz is a concept and a sound, then which one takes the priority? And again, I'm going to let you decide on that. That's basically all I got to say. I can say a lot more. I might make an addendum to this, but I just want to know kind of what you think about the state of jazz festivals right now. Because again, there are a lot of jazz festivals that are still doing it right. I love the way that Newport and North Sea, a lot of different jazz festivals are still keeping true to putting musicians who are part of the tradition, or at least not the tradition, but, you know, the lineage, right? That are steeped in the tradition and trying to push forward, but they're still doing things that are within the realm of what jazz is. And I think that's really cool as a jazz festival. I just think the type of things that Blue Note and Montreux could be doing, especially when you have, again, to me, it's just really funny to see Lil Nas X at the jazz festival. It's just funny, but, you know, they could easily get away with saying Blue Note Music Festival or Blue Note Black Music Festival, because most of these artists on here are black. I haven't checked out every single one of them. Well, yeah, with the exception of a few of them, most of them are black artists. So if that's the direction you want to go in, great. Call it Blue Note Black American Music Festival. That would be awesome. Why does it have to be jazz? They're holding on to something. These kids are, and I don't want to just single out Blue Note, because again, Montreux is even worse. You know, it's weird. It's weird that they're holding on to that. So I don't know. That's it. I'm not going to make this any longer. Tell me what you think in the comments. Should they change the name? I mean, they're probably not going to, but maybe future festivals. Should we be thinking of a new genre name for this stuff? Should we do more combinations? And, well, should we keep it as jazz? Maybe I'm being too hardline. Is Ed Sheeran jazz and I'm just freaking out? I don't know. Let me know in the comments, y'all. That's all I'm going to say. So, yeah, maybe I'll see y'all at one of those festivals. Peace.